Because if I stand there, that's kind of boring, right? I don't want to just stand there.
I'm sorry.
I can hear you too. That's fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Hold on a second. I got to pose for a picture.
Point at the screen.
Interesting
go.
things
Thank you.
here.
Thank you. That was excellent. Put it on the list. Okay. Another minute or so, and we'll go ahead and get started, okay? Anastasia ran away.
Should we go out the hall?
You guys totally intimidated when she left. Oh, they started trying to break back in. Nope. Do what?
Should we all clap when she comes in?
Yeah, when she, well, yeah, that's a great idea. Oh,
No.
good idea. All right, so when she comes in and starts walking toward the front, everybody just start clapping, like give her a really big hand when she comes in. She's completely freaked out to be in. This will be good. This will be good. Can we get some video of this part? I would really like to see her face.
Flashes and everything.
I wonder really if she is coming back though. This could get a lot more interesting all of a sudden. Is there any other chairs we can get or anything? I hate people having to stand up. So.
There's a spot, chair here.
There's a chair. There's a chair right there. There's a chair right here in the front. Guys, if you want to have a seat, I promise we will not bite. There's a box of cigars there too. I'm not sure what that's for. I'm gonna take that anyway.
Just in case.
Nobody's smoking during class.
Well, the last guy was giving them out when people ask
Yeah.
questions.
That's he left the box. I love that. That's a fantastic reward for asking questions.
What are you giving out?
Positive vibes. Yeah, that's about it. That's all. I did see people giving out candy for questions. I thought that was pretty good. I really wanted to walk in so we embarrass her. This is gonna be so funny. She's gonna love that.
You know, I could always just make it. I can do it.
You could do it.
Yeah.
You gonna do the presentation with me?
Mumbles? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you would need the microphone because you mumble a lot. I'm really wondering if she's coming back.
This was her first presentation.
Yeah, it's the first time she's ever done one. So. It's classic.
So everybody knows.
I didn't know I'm not doing lip syncing. I'm not. Those lip syncs, I gotta say, I was really impressed. I was really impressed. Everybody, Anastasia. Well, they were ready to go.
I wasn't done with my panic attack outside.
Okay.
How's it now?
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And then we're gonna have some people walking in, and that's fine. I don't really care. So the name of our talk is Modularity Matters. What we're going to talk about is atomic design and how it applies into Sitecore. So a couple of things that we just want to get out of the way. The first thing we want to do is tell you we are not designers. Neither of us are designers. We're both developers. We're both on the technical side. At BrainChalks as a company, we have in-house design, but design is not our core competency. We are a technology partner. We typically partner with creative agencies that do the design work as a part of the project. We do the implementation. Okay, so that being said, what we want to talk about is how you should approach design and what you want to do with it. So why two developers are talking about design? Well, because how many developers do we have in here right now? Oh man, that's my people. That's fantastic. Okay, so how many of you have had problems with design agencies in the past? So all of us, right? All of us.
They have wild imaginations.
They do. They do. They think everything's a green field. Why can't I put a dot right there? Well, let's not talk about that. What we get when we start a Sitecore project is something like this. Big stack of comps. All right. Most of the time when we start a project, the comps are already done. And they're just looking for somebody just to make that happen. I can't tell you how many times I've heard those words. Just make that happen. Do that. Not how, why, or anything else, but just do that. So what teams start doing when they start working with Sitecore, the first thing that teams start doing is they use an approach that we refer to as templated design. A Sitecore implementation would have a number of page types that would identify and line up with those shapes that we all just saw. And when I wanted to insert a page that looked like number 9, I would pick that data template and I would insert that page type. Now how I implemented that, there's actually a variety of ways. Since I have data templates for each type, I can just code the renderings directly into the layout. I can put the fields directly in the data template for that type. I don't even require a page editor for that. So that's really, really easy, and that's why teams start there. They always start there. Now what's the problem with templated design? What happens when the marketer sees this page right here, which maybe this is a product page, and they say, you know what? The service page is going to look exactly like the product page. So what do? They use the product page for the service page. Even though the product page might have some special functionality, it might have search tied to it or something else that they weren't aware of. They were just looking at this from a creative standpoint and saying, how can I reuse it? So then when they figure out that happened and they break something, then they have to come back to the developers and say, hey, I need a service page that looks exactly like this, but it doesn't do X and Y and Z. Did you want the cigars back?
I'm back.
You really do forget everything.
Yes, that's what
This
I told
is amazing.
you. Gophers are really expensive for me. Thanks, man.
So then they come out to the developers, and the developers, they say, well, we can build you a services page that excludes these behaviors, but goes ahead and implements these components and that template and blah, blah, blah. And then they build it. So it creates dependencies. It doesn't give the marketer the flexibility that they want, and that's the real key. Now, a more mature Sitecore team might look at this design and start to do what we would refer to as cherry picking. Might identify components that are in the design that really are reusable. I see the header, I see the footer, I see the sidebars repeated on different pages. So as a developer, we are instinctively wired for being lazy, all right? The idea of being a good software developer is to be as lazy as you possibly can.
Efficient.
That's another way of saying it, sure. All right. Lazy is good. So if we're lazy, then I want to code this one time and I want to be able to use it on different pages. So now we start thinking about some components. We're going to start building some components. And this looks pretty good, right? I've got a header, I've got a footer. Now how we add these components, once again, we have to start thinking about this. So Sitecore, when I want to build a footer and I want to put it on every page, I'm going to create a rendering probably, and I'm going to statically bind it to a layout document. Okay? What's the problem with that? Static. Static's bad. Whenever you hear the word static, that's a problem, right? It's very inflexible. When I look at this sidebar right here, and I create a rendering out of that, there's actually some problems with that too. So what are the problems? So there's a lot of things that the comps don't say. When I look at this composition, I can build this, that's easy. All right, I can build it out of templated design, I can build it out of components. But when I build that sidebar as my component, when I identify that sidebar as my component, then they come back and they say, hey, I want to personalize this. Okay, well, I didn't build it like that exactly. That whole thing was a component, so now I have to go back and extract that back out and do something else with it. The other thing is when I look at the design, let's talk about this carousel for a second. Carousel is the bane of all of our existence, right? there's an infinite number of ways these carousels can be built, but the way that your carousel is built is you have an image over here, you have text over here, you have a button right here. That's pretty simple, right? That's the design. That's what it said. It says it on the comp. So they come back and they say, hey, I was editing this page in Sitecore. I wanted to move the image over there. You mean I can't do that? I mean, I thought this was Sitecore, right? This is a really good tool. This thing costs a lot of money. Why can't I move the image over to the right side? You say, well, you can, but I'm going to create you another carousel rendering so that you can put the over there on that side. That's cool. And you'll just be able to select which one you want. And say, oh, but sometimes I need 2 buttons.
Another rendering.
Yes. Oh, okay. All right. So I'll have 2 button fields. And if you only need 1 button, just leave the other one empty, and then that's totally cool, right? That's no problem. And then they do this. And then you just like give up. Like inside you die a little bit. So what the comps don't say, there's a lot, right? Well, what else don't the comps say? So companies usually don't buy Sitecore because they want to build one website. That's not why, right? They want to build 10, 20, or 100. And when you built this first site, what they didn't tell you is there's another 10 coming right after it. And because you built the first site already, well, shouldn't it be easy to build the other 10 or whatever? That should be pretty simple. And then they say, so we don't want to go through another 6 months of this. We want you to just build the next site. And then you say, well, the way that I design these components, that next site is going to look like this. Because there's only so much I can do with CSS, and the way that those components are originated in the layout, I can't really rearrange it all that much. I can only style it a little bit. So these components lack what we would refer to as portability. Portability meaning I can use it on multiple pages. That's not what we mean by portability. What we mean by portability is I can use this for multiple projects. I can use this for multiple sites within a single tenant environment or within a multi-tenant environment, whatever. All right, so now let's solve this problem. All right, so our criteria to solve this problem, let's talk about that for a second. I want flexibility for the editor and the content admin. I want a clear path for reuse for the software development teams. Not just to reuse things within the site, but I want portability. Portability is the goal, the ultimate goal of Sitecore, right? I want adaptability to any design. We've worked with a number of design agencies. And like we said, we've all kind of struggled there. We all admitted it. Everybody raised their hand, I saw it. We can't tell them how to change their design. Because by the time the design gets to us, the customer's approved it. So if we change the design, it goes back to the customer, and the customer says, what are those dumb developers? I can't even build that. I mean, duh, that's stupid. So we don't want them to change the design. We want to be able to adapt to any look and feel requirements. That's really important. And by the way, not that I have anything against content editor, but I believe that for the marketer, a page editor first approach is where it's at. And that means avoiding things like statically bound renderings or elements on the page. We don't want any of that. We want everything to be as flexible as we want it to be. Maybe there's a case where I want that header statically bound, but I shouldn't require it to be done that way by a development team. And then finally, we want these features to work with Sitecore's marketing automation tools. So personalization, multivariate test, all those things should work, and they should work out of the box exactly like they were designed. Okay, so for this, what we're going to do is we're going to take inspiration from a concept called atomic design. Now, atomic design is not a term that we created. It was actually coined by a gentleman by the name of Brad Frost. And he lectures, he goes around the country. If you look him up on YouTube, I think you can, or Vimeo, I think you can find his talk about atomic design. And he gets much more into the methodology behind it than I'm going to in this class. So I do think it's something that would be really good to see. But the concept of atomic design is actually really simple. Rather than building these complex solutions to things that are silly, like carousel panels and 3,000 renderings to figure out all the permutations they could go to, allow the content administrator to assemble these elements by using reusable building blocks. So it is the Lego model for building user interface design. Okay. All right, now the analogy that Mr. Frost uses in atomic design breaks design down into these kind of 5 tenets, or these 5 pillars, 5 pieces. The first piece is called an atom. An atom is the smallest component I can have. It cannot be broken down any further than it already is. So this is something very simple, like a button or a text box or a menu item or something like that, right? Something that cannot be broken down any further. But they're obviously very useful on their own. The next step up from an atom is a molecule. A molecule is an assembly of these atoms into something that is usable, reusable, okay? So in this case, I have what we refer to in our product as a highlight. All right, a highlight is a collection of an image and a text box, and actually our highlight doesn't have a button, but it has a place where you can put as many buttons as you want. That's a different story. But anyway, the point is it's an assembly of this into a structure that I can use over and over again. Okay? Oh, I was looking at your screen instead of mine. I was like, what happened? The next step up from a molecule is what's called an organism. So when I take these atoms and these molecules and I assemble them into something that is actually usable, like a header or a footer or a sidebar or an accordion or a carousel or whatever, that's what is referred to as an organism. Okay? And then finally we have some things that are very familiar to us, like templates. So when I take these organisms and I assemble them into a structure that I want for a page, then I create a template out of it. And Sitecore has a couple of templating tools that we know of, all right? Things like standard values and branch templates. And we want to be able to use those things with atomic design, and we're going to talk about how to do that. And then finally, there is the actual page. All right, so now I have a template that is filled with content that's going to be referred to as a page. So our job as Sitecore developers is really, really simple. We want to take this design methodology and we want to convert this into a component architecture for Sitecore, and we want this to work. So we have to reorganize this concept into a collection of renderings or data source items or something, right, and make this work inside of Sitecore. And we might encounter 1 or 2 challenges. Okay, so let's talk about what those challenges are and how we're going to overcome them. Now, before we do that though, let's stop and let's take a look at the carousel through the lens of atomic design. Your turn, Slick.
Thank you, Brian. Isn't he good at this? He sets the bar really high.
Oh, you're sweet. Okay. So I'm here and nobody's logged in, but you're driving
Are you
now.
incognito?
Yep. You want an incognito window too?
So, clients love carousels. They highlight features, they promote campaigns, they're shiny and big and they move, they grab your attention. So they like to use them for a lot of the feature content that changes frequently. So your carousel probably needs to change frequently too.
I don't even know what the log is. It is not. It would have been funny if it was, though, wouldn't it? So while she's doing this right now, let me talk to you about our little demo site just so you understand it. So Brain Juice is a demonstration site that we built with our product. Now I'm really trying to not turn this talk into a talk about BrainJock's score. Shameful plug. Okay. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this kind of through the lens of how we did it. And we're not trying to imply that we're the only ones that fixed the problem or this is the only approach to it. And there's other accelerator products out there that do it. This is our approach, right? So because we took this as kind of a premise or a methodology for how we did it, we're going to kind of just look at it through that lens. Okay, go ahead, Nancy.
Yes. So we got the request from the marketers to put this carousel on the homepage. And we don't want to permanently hard code us into this 3 panels with these specific images and this specific layout. We want to be prepared for the future, for when they come back to us and change their campaign. So how do we do that? So we have atomic design to the rescue.
Ooh, that was nice.
Yes. And as soon as it slows.
Eventually.
Yes. It's obvious
it'll
that
come to the rescue.
it's obvious that a carousel would be a molecule in the definitions you were saying.
Yeah, that's interesting too. Ooh.
But
I've never seen Sitecore look well on though.
the thing that's not clear is how the atoms that make up the content of the carousel are defined. And there's no right answer here. The modularity and the granularity of your content items, it depends on your needs. We try to make them as basic and as simple as possible so that you can get the most reuse out of them. So here's our carousel component. And the carousel component is simply a container that has a placeholder in it that allows you to insert as many carousel panes into it as you want. You can add them, you can delete them. It's simply adding a rendering. And as you can see, it's all page editor friendly, so content editors can do this, marketers can do this. It doesn't have to go back to a developer to make changes. Inside your carousel panel, we have some options. We can set the background image. We can change the font color, the background color. We even have rendering parameters on the carousel pane so that you can add special classes to it.
That's that stupid scroll thing. Scroll back down.
Oh, because it shows up on the bottom?
Yeah, I don't know where it is. It's in there somewhere.
Trust me, it's there. Carousel itself. This is the carousel itself, and you can add classes to the background, classes to the carousels, and then the panes themselves have a selection for classes as well.
Now the inner structure, when you add a pane to the carousel, and really the point of the atomic design piece of the carousel, is when I add a pane to the carousel, the pane is a canvas. It's a blank slate, it's empty. So what I do from there is I'm going to add in structure. Now scroll or cancel that and then scroll back down to the one that's divided up into 3.
I don't know why your thing is so slow.
Why my thing is so slow? That's a terrible thing to say.
Nice.
You're awful.
This is on video.
Do what? It's on video.
Yeah.
What?
Series video.
That's crazy. All right. Sitecore's not cooperating with us. So the point of that is, though, is that from that structure, laying the inner structure, laying the molecules, laying the atoms into the design, then I should be able to achieve anything. Now, by achieve anything, sometimes you do have to take special measures in CSS. CSS is still a very important part of the equation. So just laying that structure in many cases is not going to be enough. So I have to be able to target those things with CSS classes. We refer to these things as styling variances. All the components are going to have at least one styling variance. Some styling variances are used to control things like responsive behavior. So I can go to the carousel level and I can say, do not show this on mobile devices. I don't want the carousel to show up on a mobile phone. Or I can go to an individual panel of a carousel and I can say, take this panel off when you're on a mobile phone. And what we're going to talk about later is how I can go to one of those panels and I can say, change this panel with another one if they come from Australia based on using Sitecore's marketing automation tools.
Right, because the carousel is the data source.
All right.
I was trying to add a new one. This thing's been really slow.
I think my machine's never run the demo, so that was our fault. So if you want, we can actually unplug and just kind of do the rest of it from yours if you want. Okay, so the question is, does this actually work in Sitecore? And obviously, yes, it does. Sitecore includes some great tools, shameless plug, for atomic components. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because Sitecore does allow you to build atomic components and does allow this to work, but really only because Sitecore is extremely extensible. It's very customizable. Right? There's a lot of things that we can do with Sitecore's developers that we can overcome some obvious challenges. So what are the obvious challenges? So templates and pages in atomic design are built by assembling components, atoms and molecules on the page, and building organisms, and then building pages from those templates. Now, when you buy Sitecore, Sitecore comes in as an empty box. It doesn't come with a component library. You've got to build one. The atomic components that we created inside of our product each layer, and we have one for Bootstrap 3, for Zerb, one coming out for Bootstrap 4, has roughly 100 components inside of it. And that takes care of those typical user experience elements. Okay? Nesting is an obvious requirement. If I have to lay in structure and then add content into structure, then I have to be able to nest content inside it. Who all has used dynamic placeholder keys? Yes. Very, very handy piece of technology. And that's something that will allow you to implement nesting. Now, there are some other challenges in nesting that you need to be aware of. Things like the use replacement rendering feature inside of Sitecore. When I swap a rendering and it contains content, what happens with dynamic placeholder keys? Anybody know? It goes poof, gone, just wipes it off the page. All right. Because dynamic keys allow us to nest that content, but Sitecore's replacement rendering feature does not know about that. All right, so you have to fix that. Now here's another one. What happens when you want to do a personalization? Okay, you want to do a personalization, or maybe you want to do a multivariate test, and there's nested content within it. How does that affect things like caching? Okay, now here's another one. This one will get you too. What happens when I have a accordion, right, and I want to swap that to a tab set? It's built out of individual pieces, right, all these nested content elements, and I don't want to have to rip all that stuff apart and rebuild it, because it's a lot of steps. Once again, we are lazy as a people. We are lazy, so we don't want to do that. And we don't want the marketers to do it either, because then they'll push back and they say, oh, yeah, this is terrible, whatever. And also doing things like swapping a 3-column layout to a 2-column layout. What happens to that third column? Where'd it go? Where'd content go? So you have to define features that are actually going to do that. Now once again, I'm trying not to make this into a shameless plug or product, but these were the problems that we encountered when we were trying to make this simpler for the marketer. Now, since I'm not making this a shameless plug of our product, I will mention that there are some YouTube videos out there where we address all the problems that I just talked about. So things like rendering compatibility rules, okay? Changing compatibility on a tenant side basis. Things like rendering transformations. Being able to take an accordion, which has accordion panels inside of it, use Sitecore's built-in replace a rendering feature and have it rewrite all the nested renderings from accordion panels to tabs, okay? With retaining all the content. Swapping a 3-column layout with a 2-column layout and making sure the content is mapped accordingly, and allowing you to control that through rules. So we came up with a lot of answers to those problems, but we can't talk that much about that. But those are the obvious problems. Those are probably the problems that you already know about as a developer, that those are pretty simple. But Atomic Design has some not so obvious problems too. Atomic Design wants you to build these templates visually. They want this to be a tool that the marketers can use. You shouldn't have to code every single organism, every single rendering, okay? Every single one of these molecules. And when I build the template out of these things, I want to be able to build it in a visual way. How many of you use standard values with page editor? Okay, so a couple. It's not a very friendly technique. Okay, and we'll talk about why. But there's some issues with how the Sitecore content tree is organized, right? So your content's up here, media library's down here. Templates are in here somewhere. Branch templates are up here. So when you start doing things like having style selections that are tenant specific, right? I want my highlight classes to be specific to my tenant. That becomes a challenge. Also, when I'm using standard values, then I'm looking for things like shared content folders. Okay, how can a component know where my shared content is for a site that may be somewhere entirely different in the content tree? Okay, so also a challenge. So doing this is very tricky. Now, the other thing is we go back to this rendering portability concept. If I'm writing a component layer that I can use on different projects, I know for a fact that I cannot code a query as the data source location path for my renderings. Why not? Why can't I do that? What?
It'll be different.
There you go, it'll be different. companies want to model the content tree according to the way they're organized. They might be divided into divisions, sections, markets, brands, whatever. I don't want to force them to use a content tree that I came up with. They need to be able to organize their content in a way that makes sense to them. And by the way, they might have different levels of shared content, okay? So I can create content on a page, I can create content on a site and share it to multiple pages. I could create content to share to multiple sites. And maybe my sites are grouped by things like brands or market group or market, division, whatever. Maybe I want to have 4 shared content folders because of how I'm organized as a company. So I cannot code that crazy behavior into a component, can I? Well, we need to look at that. And then finally, where's my organism? Sitecore doesn't have a feature that will allow you to build an organism according to atomic design. I don't have a thing where I can build a header out of individual building blocks and then deploy that into many pages and templates and branch templates. Okay. Now the question is, how do we approach this? Now, do you want to swap to your laptop?
It does seem to be faster.
It's faster? Okay. Sorry. All right. I want to make Anastasia feel as welcome as I can. And you guys did a really good job of that, by the way. That was the clapping. I thought that was pretty good. That was pretty epic. Okay. You might want to change your resolution. Apologies. This is all her fault. Okay. How's that? Is that good?
I think that's good.
Is that better?
So, here, move
Sure.
the beauty of having these independent atoms and molecules is that they're generic enough so that they can be layered into your content from the standard values level. They don't have to go on the page. And what goes in the standard values is what's going to appear on every instance of that template in your content tree. So if you have something like a breadcrumb, which goes on every content page, you can put that on standard values. Now, usually, you can only edit standard values in presentation details. With SCORE, it exposes the visual editor to your standard values. So as you can see here, for our Brain Juice content pages, we have a stripe, which is just a full width container, and a breadcrumb inside of it. So this will propagate to all content pages unless they explicitly take that out.
Now, before we leave here, Anastasia, see, I do this to people. I'm sorry. Pavel told you that I do this. Before we leave this page, this is a very simple construct in this case, right? Now, templated pages can be much more elaborate than this one, and we'll probably look at one here in a second. It's going to be
We can look at the product details page, standard values.
Let's take a look at that. They're breaking in. Can you scroll? All right, go for it.
So this is the layout of the product details. All these are individual components, the title, the year of our wine, the main image, the gallery. We have a tab set here with content. Also, each individual components, here's a tab with a content spot. Then we have our recently viewed component. And on the bottom, which if those of you who've seen our site, you've seen our search. And when you click on a product in your search results, it expands a quick view. So you can actually edit the layout of that quick view. It's componentized. It's the same exact components that are going here. They're just going here. You can organize your quick view any way you want.
Now, this is important because remember how standard values works, right? This is all through layout deltas. For this particular product, this is standard value, so this is gonna, if I make a change here, any products that are created from this template that are connected to standard values, they're gonna change. They're gonna take on whatever design change I make, and those layout deltas are gonna apply to that page.
Yes.
Okay?
So this is great for the business side. They don't have to go and edit
The
every single
business
page.
side?
Yes.
It's great for those people that use the stuff.
Yes.
Yes. Now, the smaller and the more molecular these components are, the better my design is. All right. So in this case, obviously these fields and the structure, those are all components, but what if I wanted to move the thumbnail strip above the photo in the gallery? Should be able to do that too, right? So those components need to be atomic as well. Now, because this is a template, like I said, we can make a change here, it applies to all of them, but I can also go into individual product pages, and I can edit product pages and make those changes as well, if I wanted to make a change just for that product, because that's how layout deltas work, and that's very important. Hey, Pablo. Okay. Anastasia, can you go back to the other content page for a second? All right, now, we also said that when you're editing from standard values from branch template, that the site-specific selections need to be able to apply in that context of editing as well.
So should we show branch templates first?
Go to a color selection first.
So, let's say I wanted to add something.
Well, you have a stripe right there. You have a stripe with background color selection right
Oh,
there.
but that's a field.
No, background color. Trust me. Yes. All right, color selections. So color selections in our way of doing it are tenant specific. I define a palette of colors that are selectable for whatever reason, for whatever field types for that tenant, but I'm editing something way down here in the content tree. The selections that are related to this tenant are up here in the content tree somewhere else. So Sitecore has to know how to go get those things and that those templates belong to that site. So the selections are tied together. We do this through a rules engine implementation. We won't get into that detail, but that's one of the challenges that you have to encounter. Go back down to the stripe again and select the data source location for it. Oh, no, not that. That's rendering parameters. Cancel that. And go back to it again. The stripe. Click on the, yep, there you go. Is it because it's falling off the screen?
Yeah, that's why.
Or what is it, my click? Oh, I'm sorry, you're clicking on that.
I've never used those buttons. I don't know what they do.
They all look yellow
Full
from the
disclosure.
giant screen.
It's loading, it's spinning.
All right, we're gonna let it spin. It's like a rate. Love you so much. Okay, so here's the data source selection dialog from the components that are down here. Now, and like we said before, in this case, we don't want to hard code queries or hard coded paths, obviously, into components because we don't want the tenant to comply with certain information architecture. These are the shared content folders for this site. In this case, the green folder says only for this template, but the red folder is a multi-site shared content folder. What we have done to solve that problem is an implementation of the Sitecore rules engine, again, that allows me to define where the site shared and the multi-site shared folders are, and even use different folder templates or whatever I want based on the tenant. So the components don't know or care. That's actually being mapped to the tenant independently. Okay.
Should I show the rules?
Sure. So there's what a rule would look like.
Yeah. So it's telling you that if you're in the actual brain juice content, or if you're in the templates folder for brain juice markets, or if you're in the branch templates folder for brain juice markets, to use that content as your root. So when you're adding content to those templates, it can pull from whatever you have here. And yeah.
Okay. All right, so now I'm just going to say this part. We extend the page editing experience down into the branch template as well, which has a different set of challenges. The same, actually, but some others, right? When I create things like components on the screen, they have local data source item for that page. I need to be able to incorporate that as part of the branch process. So when I'm creating a page of that type, it needs to replicate all those data source items and create them, and it needs to rewrite that so that those are actually being selected by the page when it's used. Okay? All right. So, next on our list, we want to talk about snippets. Now, snippets for us is what we use to create an organism inside of Sitecore, because Sitecore doesn't have a way to do it. So if we wanted to create a reusable header or a footer or a sidebar, we want to build it out of individual building blocks. We don't want to hard code it. We want to reuse components from site to site again. So the only way that we can really do that is to create a new feature inside of Sitecore, and that's called snippets. So a snippet is a unit of work. I can really create anything with it. I can create a carousel, I can create a whatever. But the point is that it exists in one place in the content tree, and other pages, other templates, standard values, branch templates, whatever, simply refer to the snippet in order to pull it into the context of the page. When the snippet is executed, it executes in context of whatever page you're looking at. Okay, but that's exactly how you create an organism inside of BrainChalk Score. Now, and I believe that Zen Garden has something similar to that. I don't know exactly how it works, but I know that others have kind of solved that same problem. Okay.
And then we can cascade them down.
That's true. So when I add things into placeholders, I can actually cascade them to share them to sections of the website as well. Okay? Can we swap that? All right. Sorry about the swapping, guys. It's messing up the mojo. Feeling it.
I could do this.
Can you
As a distraction.
Can you amuse them? Thank you.
Nice.
That's good. Well played. I don't think they noticed anything. Uh-oh. What is that? What is that code?
Oh, it's
SUGCON
but
20.
it's SUGC. It depends which one you're on. The SUGCON 2015 or SUGC.
Yeah,
What is
that
that?
won't work on that.
Hey, I'm logged in. Magic. Oh, I didn't need to log in though. That's the other part. Okay. All right, so we've done our demonstration there, and now let's talk a little bit more about those components for a second. Okay. Now, there are some challenges in using these components that are a little bit more difficult to solve, right? Because we want them to remain atomic. We saw a small example of this when we looked at the product template that Anastasia showed us. Because we had the thumbnail strip for the gallery, and we wanted to be able to move it around. So was that one rendering? It was two. Okay, but they obviously have some sort of dependency. When I look at something like search, we have the same problem. Okay? When I look at this search design, my first inclination is going to be create this as some sort of a component. Because as I do a search for information, it's going to update this box right here. It's also going to update this filter to update things like facet counts or just to show me the criteria that are matching the actual results. So there's communication that needs to happen. And my first inclination is going to be to build exactly what I've got here. It's going to be to build this as a rendering because I can put everything I need into that and I'm good to go. So what's the problem with doing that? It's always going to look like that. Okay? It's not going to be easy for me to do things like moving things around. If I wanted to move that filter here, that's not terribly hard. But when I want to take the search box and put it in the header of the site, that becomes infinitely more challenging.
Or take it out altogether.
Yeah, or take it out altogether. I shouldn't require to have it. If they don't want a search box, they shouldn't have to have a search box. So what I would rather do is create these things as independent components. But I need to have some sort of facility to allow them to talk to one another. So let's take a look at that really fast. Can you do that? Yeah, fast. As we swap again.
Put the glasses.
Distract them with the glasses. The work glasses.
Keeping me logged in. Okay.
Good.
And what thing?
I don't think they noticed. Okay, so yeah, go to the front end of the site and show them the search experience if you would.
That's what I'm trying to do. What's keeping me logged in?
Log out. I thought incognito wasn't supposed to keep you logged in.
I know, right?
Are you getting irritated with me again?
No, I'm getting irritated with Chrome. There.
teenagers. She almost heard, oof.
Yes.
All right, good. So let's go take a look at the shop section of the site. It's blazing fast.
Well, it's incognito, there's no cache.
No, it's terrible.
Those are high resolution images, it's those graphics people.
Sorry, Ken. Okay, so now in this case, we have a wine store, right? Ranges is our wine store. And we have a grid of products, as we shared before. And if you look at the grid, we have the search box. And look, the search box is actually in the header. We have navigation on the left-hand side that says here's where the different products break down for categories. And then we, of course, have selections of facets down at the bottom. Now, we also have the product grid. And by the way, when you quick view one of these wines, yeah, that is fast. That is fast. When you quick view one of these products, we get to see our quick view panel that we saw in the page editor earlier. Okay. So now let's look at this through the editor context. Go to the All Products page as a Sitecore editor. They really did lock you out that time. That's good. That is a sexy login screen. It's very decadent.
Ready to go?
It is, it's very rich red.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All products. I know you built the site. Can you select some more things? That's not all products.
Oh, you wanted I thought you wanted a product.
She
Oh,
said,
were
you
talking
said
about-
I know.
We were talking about
You
the
just said I know. I said go to all products, you said I know.
So this page is built out of page template, not the branch template?
This page, the all
Yeah.
products page?
No, just the one product.
One product. The product page for us is a little bit different because we have special components that are reading the product information directly, like some basic information for the product, but you also have this concept of product variants. So product variants are kind of a special data source item for this demo site. We don't get too deep into that here, but so you can do the variation selection and the cost, and all those components are aware of the fact that products have variations and how they fit together. Now the search screen, when I look at this in the editor, this is what I want to kind of focus on. So notice that here's my search box, way up here somewhere entirely different.
You can edit the
And
placeholders.
yeah, of course, it's manageable, right? I can apply CSS classes or do whatever I want to it. And then we have our breadcrumb stuff we saw earlier, and then we have some giant hero masthead image, very good image, Ken. Thank you for that. Then we have our product grid, and then we have some things over here like what are the filters that we want to be able to see on this screen,
This
right?
text also editable.
Yep.
Everything is page editor.
Everything has to be page editor friendly for us. Now, if I wanted to reshape this page, Anastasia, can we go and swap this layout for a different layout potentially? Maybe a 2-column large left? Can you do that? I guess not.
There's
Well,
your
if we
answer.
could have, that would have been great.
The facets.
Do what?
The
We
facets.
can split the facets. Yeah, so the point of this is that everything is independent components, right? So the structure of the page is an independent piece. If I did swap it, then those things would essentially move. The grid would move to the left, the other parts would move to the right, and those things are very important. That's the concept of atomic design. You want to make those things independent. If I didn't want the faceting bar on this particular page, it's an individual component, I can delete it. If I don't want to have the search on this page, I can delete it. So I have the ability to control it, I have the ability to shape the page in whatever form that I want.
You can even delete this guy, and the facets and search, they'll still update the URL bar and show you how many results are available. They don't care.
So components can't just be about delivering content, right? They have to be about delivering user experience. Breaking user experience down into individual pieces is a little more complicated than breaking down components for content into individual pieces. So what we did in SCORE is we created a JavaScript framework to allow you to build these components and to allow them to communicate with one another. It's a very simple event model, but allows you to really build any user experience that you can imagine by using these individual building blocks. Okay. All right. Good.
I'm just gonna show communication.
That's okay. No, that's okay. All right, guys. So that is the end of our talk. That is BrainJock SCORE, a little bit of BrainJock SCORE. Not much, just a little bit. There's a lot of videos. Go see the videos. But that is our take on atomic design and how we work with it in Sitecore. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Can you come up? So I can.
I'm really interested in this approach, and one of the things that I've thought about with the way that this is done is exposing what is possible to content administrators so that they can see what they can do. So all the things you talked about, and it's great, and I love the implementation inside, but have you considered doing something with like sort of an interactive style guide that shows here are your atoms, here are your molecules, here are your page templates, so that they kind of know, because that's what I get a lot is that people will ask, hey, well, I need a new layout for this page that I have that, it's a category page or section page, and they don't feel like that the design as it stands today has that, and being able to show them the possibilities, is that something that you've looked at?
We have, and really with each project, what's possible is different, right? And what's required is different. What's possible is different. We have a feature in SCORE that we don't show. It's a concept called a macro component. Let's say that in the particular design that I have, some structure is really common, right? It's on different page types, it's being used in different places. It takes a lot of pieces to build it. I don't want them to have to know how to do that necessarily. So what I can do is I can take that assembly of components and I can go ahead and build that as a macro. And then I can simply run that into a page and it will create itself in the context of the page. So when we do projects with particular clients, what we might do is standardize on the snippets that we create for them kind of as a starting point. We might standardize on the macros that we create for them as a starting point. And it kind of gives them that sense of here's what should be easy and what should be possible. Good question. Anything else? Yes.
When you're doing everything in these little tiny pieces, like how are you handling like data sources for all these little tiny components? Are you building them ahead of time so that when somebody, I saw like you could edit the text in the button. I imagine that button's probably a component to itself. Yeah. So that data source for where that button text is at, are you, because you don't want to, you usually have to add a button, go select the data source for a button, all that kind of stuff. Are you creating it ahead of time, and when somebody puts it on the page, you're automatically tracing to its current
we don't
location?
create it ahead of time. You still have to create it. I mean, you still have to either create it or select it. And you still have to be able to support content that is page specific, like this button. I'm not sharing the content for this button anywhere else.
Yeah.
Or maybe I have a standard button I want to put in shared content. So if I change it here, it changes wherever that actual button is actually used to at my site. Maybe I even have a button in multi-site shared content that is like a special marketing button that has tracking or whatever else. I want to put that in multi-site shared content somewhere else. So for us, what we do is through the implementation of the rules, we allow you to control where the content is allowed to go for that component. At a component level or at a tenant level, whatever you want. And we also automate the creation of the folders that are needed for each component type. So we segment it by component type so they're well organized in the content tree and you can easily find them. So, but yeah, you still need to have one. So we got to create it. We just can't assume where they want to put it, right? So we can't just create it for them.
Yeah.
But we can create the folders for them. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
In the search results, how do you get the different pieces talking to each other? So the search bar feeding the facets, feeding the results.
Well, when your components are modular, then your JavaScript can be modular too. And so we have a framework for, it's basically an event bus. So components can trigger events and then components can listen for events. And they don't know about each other. One is just triggering, oh, like this search facet changed, or the input in my text in my search box changed. And then the search results component is listening for product search results, change event.
So we call this this event bus, we call it SCARF, just because we wanted to. And the marketing people were really upset with us about calling it that, because that doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So the scarf, it is a framework piece of what we do in SCORE, and we're using it in this case, right? So the components each have the ability to subscribe to events, they have the ability to publish events. Some components are a little bit simpler, though, things like buttons. Let's say that I have a button over here that I want to trigger a modal dialog somewhere else. I want to have the editor to have that kind of control. So I need to be able to link those two together. Now the version that we have of SCORE that's coming out at the end of this month will expose SCARF even to the content administrator. That's how we handle it. Okay?
So this is the modular files for your components. This is the JavaScript for the product search box, and it's triggering an event.
It's very important also to understand that using frameworks like Require, et cetera, you don't want the components to have dependencies back on the layout document necessarily. So you want to try to make them as independent as possible. But you also don't want JavaScript jerked into your solution multiple times. So you have to come up with solutions for dealing with those kinds of things as well.
And you don't want your JavaScript from one component affecting other things. You want to keep it isolated. So each of our components, when they call their JavaScript, they pass their wrapper elements to your JavaScript, so you can scope all your queries to that component. So you can have 5 search boxes there, it'll work, and they won't affect each other.
Yeah.
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 That's a great idea, right?
Everybody wants that. Okay, guys, any other questions? All right, good deal. So we're out of time. Thank you very much. What?